Welcome to the Commerce Tomorrow podcast, your one stop to learn about the technology that's powering the future of commerce. Here are your hosts, Dirk and Kelly.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of the Commerce Tomorrow podcast. At first, Happy New Year to all of you. This is our January edition that we're starting with, and I'm here with my co-host, Kelly Getch, and we have a special guest today, which is Scott Brinker. Scott has multiple roles that we will definitely cover in this podcast, and he is the VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot. So, hello, Scott.
Hello, great to be here with you guys.
Thanks for taking the time. Just to get started, for those who don't know you, can you give a little background on your professional career? Where did you start? How did you end up? And what are the current roles that you're active in?
Sure. So I've been a software entrepreneur at the intersection of technology and marketing for pretty much my whole career. Early on, one of the things I did was I ran the technology organization at a web development agency, which was actually where I first ran into this dynamic of, we'd get hired by the marketing department, but then it would be my team's role to go work with their IT department on how do you actually make that vision come to life. Over the years, I've been the CTO and co-founder of a SaaS company, Ion Interactive, made an interactive content platform for marketers. And then a year and a half ago, I joined HubSpot as their VP Platform Ecosystem to help the company do a better job of interfacing and engaging with all the other exciting MarTech and sales tech companies that are out there. So aside from that, as what started as a hobby, I started writing the blog Chief Marketing Technologist, about 10 years ago. Just fascinated by these dynamics between the worlds of marketers and the worlds of technologists and IT people colliding. And that's grown over the years. And we also then launched a conference around that, the MarTech conference, for that hybrid community of marketing technologists.
That's exciting. That's quite a few hats. And just for our audience's benefit, we met at MarTech conference where I was a speaker and Scott was the MC. So it was good to see you in your natural element. And I have to say the conference went really well. So maybe you can step back. So our listeners are more commerce technologists. What is under the marketing tech umbrella? It feels like a parallel world to our world, but I don't think a lot of commerce folks really understand what's in the scope. What are its boundaries? Where does it end? What's included? What's not? I think it'd be good to start there.
Yeah, it's a great question. Sort of the off-the-cuff answer is, well, marketing technology is any technology that marketers use. As it turns out, that's a really broad range. And part of the reasons it's broad is because the scope of marketing has been changing and expanding, particularly over these past 5 years, right? I mean, marketing used to have a relatively well-defined set of channels and activities that it focused on. And so, of course, we had software for things like email marketing. Sure, we had software for managing our ad tech. We had software we would manage, for, content on our websites, things like that. But as marketing has expanded into more of these responsibilities of customer experience across the entire life cycle that a customer has with someone, you start to get into these issues of, okay, well, how does marketing work more closely with the sales organization? How does marketing work more closely with the customer success, customer service organization? So the landscape of tools that marketers end up working with or somehow integrating with has just been expanding tremendously.
Oh, that's great. I have one topic that I would like to dive into, and I think you will enjoy it. You are very well known, I think I could even say famous, for your marketing technology landscape chart. And for everybody that does not know it, I think it's a huge poster already. I think the latest one, it's called MarTech 5000, right?
Yeah.
So it's really, really huge. I think for everybody that's interested in that, just type it into Google or go on Scott's LinkedIn profile, and then you can see it. Can you, for those who don't know it or haven't seen it. Can you explain a little bit what that is, how over the time it became so famous? And there are a lot of vendors and companies out there that you evaluate. And I know this is a lot of questions, but maybe let me drop them.
I will distill that.
how do you evaluate all that? Are you do that all alone? Do you have a team of that? So there's so many players out there. It must be a lot of work. So how did it all happen? So maybe you can start from the scratch here.
Yeah, happy to share the story of that. It was a very unexpected evolution to that project. So way back in 2011, I was going to give a presentation at a conference to a group of marketing executives where I was trying to convince them that they should have technologists on the marketing team. And one of the exhibits I used to make my case was I put together a slide of pretty much every marketing technology I knew of at the time. And it ended up being around like 150 different technologies, everything from like marketing automation to, SEO to social media management, And so the point of putting that slide up was to be able to say, listen, just look at how dependent you're becoming on technologies. It really kind of makes sense to probably have a technologist who's, part of your marketing team. And I remember everyone looked at that slide. It had exactly the effect I was hoping it would. They looked at the slide. They're like, oh my goodness, 150 marketing technologies. How will we ever keep track of them all? So it because it spurred such a great conversation, I kept going back to it year over year to like, okay, well, what's the set of marketing technologies that I hear people are using, and the next year it went from 150 to 350. And then a couple years later, it was up to 1,000, and then 2,000, and then 4,000, and then 5,000. And this past year was actually closer to 7,000. And so I have to confess, I've been as surprised by this as anyone. And yeah, for the first 5 years or so, I did this entire thing myself. But yeah, these past few years, once it got to the point where it was just thousands of them, I started to bring in some others to help. Anand Thakur helped me. There's a company called Blue Green that's now been helping these past couple years. And yeah, it's like a multi-month, team of 10 to go through and put this together.
It became a huge project and huge success. So yeah, really, really congrats on that. That's a great story to hear.
Yeah, it's just interesting to see how this space has evolved. It's hard to think of another example we'd seen before now of just this incredible explosion of choices and variety. But of course, now it's not just marketing. You see things like this in sales, in HR, and accounting. It's just the world is being eaten by software, a lot of software.
Well, I can personally attest to how difficult it must be. I go to conferences a lot, and the number one question I have for all these vendors is, what the hell do you do? And there's a lot of marketing there, and there's advertising, and there's, buzzwords, but, to try to peel back what each of these companies actually really does on a daily basis, that's a lot of work. So I give you credit for hacking through all of that and figuring that out.
Thank you.
So who are some of the big players that our listeners should know about? Who's assembling the big suites out there? Who are some of the stronger, more independent vendors? I guess who should our listeners know about?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that the landscape graphic I put together doesn't do is it doesn't do a good job of representing the relative scale of the different companies on that map. So, you've got some really large players out here like Adobe, Salesforce, Oracle, that just have a massive footprint. They've assembled marketing clouds by acquiring a lot of different solutions. In full disclosure, like on the SMB side, the company I work for, HubSpot, I think is now one of those contenders, as well. And so what you're starting to see is these large companies like that, they used to be going to market with this value proposition of say, oh, well, just buy our product and we have everything you need. And so you don't need anything else. One of the things I think people have now come and realize is, okay, my goodness, there are just too many things happening across the entire space of marketing. It's impossible for any one company to do it all. And so what all of these large marketing cloud leaders have done is actually shifted their strategies to say, okay, we will have these foundational capabilities, right? Your core CRM, core campaign management, and marketing automation, maybe like core service automation. How do you connect customer service, to these things? There's been like a handful of these just, foundational capabilities we know that everybody needs. Then what we're going to do is we're going to open up, these APIs and these extension points, and we're going to put partner programs in place to be able to vet and certify partners. And, where this leads is, an oversimplified version would be like, with the Apple iPhone or, Android, people have the core phone they get, the core apps they get on that, but then they have this access, to all these other applications that they can easily plug in. We've got a ways to go in the marketing stack before it's as easy as just, plugging on a new iPhone app. But that's the direction we're headed is, these ecosystems that have a lot of specialized solutions, but they all start to plug into these common foundations to make it a little bit more rational for people to manage it.
Speaking about trends and directions, is there anything that is currently making you excited? So what's coming 2019, 2020? Is there anything specific that you see that is going to change or that will leave a big impact?
Well, it's an interesting question. And one of the things that always surprises me every year when I'm working on the marketing technology landscape is, quite frankly, it's hard to find a category where there isn't change and innovation happening. I mean, pick a category like content management. I mean, that's arguably the oldest category on the MarTech landscape. And so you'd think, okay, well, surely that's done, right? I mean, we're set. We've been doing this for like 20 years. Nothing new is going to happen there. But yeah, this whole revolution that happened around, like headless CMS over the past couple years, and starting to think of content management beyond just hey, rendering a specific web page into, being able to manage content across all these different kinds of touch points, web and chat and mobile and voice. So, I mean, you could go through the entire landscape, and it's hard to find a category where there isn't some sort of innovation. I think if I was going to pick one thing that I am most excited about happening in the landscape, it's that when a lot of these technologies started out, you really needed an IT professional to not only get them set up, but in a lot of cases, operate them. And then in the past, 10 years or so, we've seen this evolution where, okay, these tools become more accessible by this group of hybrid professionals, these marketing technologists. So they don't work in the IT department. They actually work in the marketing department, but they're able to manage the daily operations of most of these tools. What I think we're starting to see more and more of is this next level of democratizing these tools, where increasingly a lot of these tools are usable by regular marketers that are not very technical at all. I can give you examples like for design, like graphic design. It used to be that, okay, if I want something nicely designed, I have to, be an expert in Photoshop. I have to have, graphic design skills. Well, now you can have pretty much any marketer go to a tool like Canva, and they can produce this beautiful stuff that looks like it was created by a great graphic designer, but it was just Scott playing around on his web for 15 minutes. And we see this with like data analysis. We see this with even like integration of data. If you look at tools like Zapier, just super friendly interfaces to let people say, oh yeah, I want to take this data from this form and send it to my CRM here and my marketing automation there. This is a really, this is going to be a 5-year trend, this sort of consumerization of marketing technology. But that's the thing I think I'm most excited by personally.
Yeah. That's exciting. And, on that topic, I think more from an IT standpoint, what's really remarkable is just how much IT costs and the ease of use has really gone down. I mean, the ease of use has gone up and the costs have gone down. But, I was just looking on AWS's website, and you can store 16 terabytes of data in Redshift for $6 an hour, and that used to be a really big, multi-month, multi-year project requiring millions of dollars and, buying these huge storage arrays and whatnot. But, what says the impact of all this new cloud technology and the democratization of all these services? What has that done to marketing? How has it changed it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you bring up a really great point here. It's interesting. So, the budgets that people spend on marketing technology have, risen tremendously over the past few years. And so I think there's this tendency for, if they just look at the, budget, people are like, oh my goodness, we are spending all this money on technology, this can't be efficient. But reality is, the outcomes, the benefits, the capabilities that people are getting for their money now, you're right, it's crazy. I mean, people are like applying, these machine learning algorithms to, just these massive data sets, for determining things of like, okay, well, how are we going to handle lead scoring? How are we going to handle, recommendations to product, for products to particular customers? How do we sort of manage anticipating churn? I mean, all this sort of stuff that, frankly, years ago, we could sort of dream up, but just wasn't, accessible either economically or, quite frankly, just the ease of use of it. And now so much of this stuff starts getting just built into these tools. Marketers are using all these like machine learning technologies. And, I would say for like 80% of them, they don't even know they're using them. They're like, oh yeah, no, it just told me to do this. It just recommended this. Oh yeah, it found the ideal time to send that email to this, cohort. It's pretty cool.
So speaking about that, do you also see a trend? Because we see that a little bit in the e-commerce space growing, especially at the very large brands and retailers. But on the marketing side of things, is there a trend for build it your own? So how much are tools used and customized and combined, or how much are companies that are in the shift of digital transformation that want to insource the technical components more and more? Are they also building their marketing technologies on their own, or at least some of that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic, because I think I'd almost see like there were a couple different phases. Like, so years ago, actually a lot of large companies built a lot of their own marketing technology because, quite frankly, there just weren't good commercial tools available to do what they needed to do. So they'd build their own systems for loyalty management. They'd build their own systems for CRM, their own systems for like managing, digital, marketing delivery. And then we sort of had this period here, particularly over the past 5 years, where, thanks to the landscape, right, the plethora of tools that are available to them, there'd been a lot of adoption of commercial systems. But now what's happening is because so many of these tools are open and they have APIs, they're all based up in the cloud anyway, so they have this sort of service architecture that, you can access. We're starting to see a trend now in the other direction where these companies have subscriptions to a bunch of commercial tools, but they're increasingly sort of, rolling their own secret sauce, of how do we, what's the level above this that connects the way we use all these tools in the context of our larger digital transformation and, the end-to-end customer experience. And so I think we're just starting to see momentum build in that direction. I'll be really curious to see, okay, well, what ends up being the balance between, how much of the tech is, rented off the shelf and how much is, custom to a particular company.
Yeah, as Dirk mentioned, we see the same thing in the commerce space. I think folks are really trying to figure it out now. So, on that topic, there's this new breed of SaaS companies out on the market, and you've captured quite a few of them in your landscape. But, a lot of these organizations you can go to and hand them a credit card, and for $20, $100 a month, whatever it is, you can start using their services, which is great because it allows these semi-technical marketing teams to actually go in and really innovate. The issue, though, is how do you allow those marketers to innovate while adhering to corporate-wide standards around data security, data privacy? Because all it takes is, one idiot with a credit card and, you can do a lot of damage, right? You could get sued and make the front page of a lot of newspapers for some type of data breach. So, how do you allow that freedom while at the same time making sure that nobody does anything stupid that gets you in trouble? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's, this is a real challenge because, at the end of the day, there's a couple different ways in which it's challenging. We can even abstract it from the individuals and just say, there is a business trade-off here between, and this is a age-old battle between, okay, well, what do we do that minimizes our risk? And what do we do that maximizes our growth opportunities? And this is a trade-off. The most secure computing system in the world is the one you unplug. But the value harnessed from it tends to, drop to zero. And so I think for a lot of companies, there's not a single simple answer to this. I think what I usually recommend to people is that they do think of this in tiers. Okay, there's going to be the system that's going to hold our personal identifiable customer data. And now, thanks to, particularly regulations like GDPR and other privacy regulations, similar to that happening around the world, is, okay, this is something that we need to have in a centralized system. We need to have technical mechanisms of governing to make sure that data, who can access that data and in what context, so that, again, if nothing else, we're just adhering to the law of making sure that we've got consent on this data. And when a customer says, hey, I want to be forgotten from your systems, we're able to do that in a good motion. I think as you start to get to these other tiers of tools that marketers use in their day-to-day work, the other extreme would be a tool like Canva, right? That one I mentioned, like, hey, listen, if a marketer wants to use their credit card to get a subscription to Canva to go make an infographic, do we really need to get 6 layers of approval from, the IT and compliance department? Probably not, right? Just the risk, the overlap, the intersection there with, data, and compliance issues is just incredibly small. And so if you look at that as the continuum of like the customer data, center on one end and, tools like Canva on the other, the question becomes in that messy middle of like, okay, well, at what point in time can people access certain data when they collect certain data? What are the rules of governance for that? And to be honest, this is, I don't know of a single company of any real size that isn't struggling with how to implement the right sort of governance for that.
I think this is also an opportunity for companies to embrace that and to come up with solutions over the next 2-3 years. I think GDPR was one thing. I know California is coming now up with a new privacy law. And who's accessing what data? What SLAs do you have in place across so many tools? So at some point, you need to consolidate it. And I think who's moving there in the best kind of way, I think, is creating a huge market opportunity also.
I agree.
So talking about that a little bit, or maybe this is a good bridge to another question I have. You quickly mentioned that early at the beginning. When you look at marketing technology and how it's consumed by organizations, small ones to large ones, are they more going for a suite-focused approach? So say, okay, like the Adobes who say, okay, we can give it all to you? Or do companies say, no, we need to have best of breed because there are so many things that we have to cover and it can't all come from one vendor? So what is the status quo here and where do you think this trend will go over the next 2 years?
Yeah, it's it's funny. It's been such a heated debate over the years, but in many ways, I kind of feel like the debate is over. The answer is actually both. Basically, people want to standardize on one or two primary systems that serve as like their foundation, almost like the tentpole.
You mean like CRM or something like that as a
exactly, and it might actually even be more than just CRM, right? Like if you're picking the Adobe system, right? You're not only getting actually I don't think they have a good CRM solution at the moment, but like you could get like the Adobe web management. I might get Adobe Campaign. I might use Adobe's solution for data management platform for advertising. And so it's sort of like, okay, well, let me start with what I can get from Adobe. And then because Adobe has now opened up more of its APIs and it's worked to build a certified partner ecosystem, the question becomes, okay, for these other capabilities that I want to add to my stack, how many of them can I actually now just get from Adobe's partner ecosystem? And so I sort of get this benefit of, in many ways, I'm picking the specialist tools out of that ecosystem that best suit my needs. But because they are certified partners to that platform, I have some assurance that, okay, I don't have to necessarily figure this integration out from scratch on my own. Adobe and the partner have, done the initial hard work of figuring out how do we make these two things play nicely together out of the box. And so I think we're seeing more of that. I mean, you can look at things like, the app exchange on Salesforce is just, thriving. There's this thing of, okay, I'll use Salesforce as my foundational CRM. And now these are all the other applications that feed into it. Again, self-promotion, it's the same thing happening here at HubSpot. Our partner ecosystem, has exploded now to hundreds of partners that, a customer can just say, oh, I want an influencer management solution here. Bam, just plug this in and it out of the box now works with, our CRM interface and things like that. So I guess the trend of where I hope this ends up is people get the best of both worlds. They have that sort of stable foundation of a suite that gives them like maybe 70 or 80% of the capabilities they need. And then they have the ability to get that sort of best of breed magic for augmenting the suite out of the partner ecosystems with the other capabilities they want.
I like that pragmatism. I think a lot of folks are firmly down on one side or the other. And I very much agree that it's, pick what works best for you kind of approach. So the commerce platforms, on this topic, a lot of the big commerce platforms out there, if you look at Hybris, if you look at Oracle Commerce, WebSphere Commerce, a lot of them, they have marketing automation or marketing technologies built into the platforms. Because for a long time, the commerce platforms themselves were meant to be basically the ERP systems of the front office, right? Everything connected through them. Everything was integrated through them. They were evaluated according to how many different features they had. So a lot of these commerce platforms actually have some marketing capabilities built in. Are you seeing people use those features, or are those features pretty universally just disregarded? Or it probably depends, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it varies. I think, again, actually the large commerce providers you could look at as very similar to the large marketing clouds, where basically, the original idea was, okay, well, can we just give the customer everything they need in one solution? Wouldn't that be nice? And the vision there was beautiful. Just the challenge is just too damn many things, and like, every 6 months, marketers come up with like new tactics or new channels that, didn't exist before that they want to try. So I think what you're seeing is, again, also in the commerce ecosystems, and I confess I know them less well than, like the marketing clouds, but the ones I've looked at, right? I mean, they also have opened up these APIs. They've also, made it possible to say, okay, well, here's the set of stuff you get out of the box. If this covers everything you need, that's awesome. But if there are other things you want to do that we don't do natively, hey, wonderful news. We integrate with the following tools that can give you those capabilities, and then each customer sort of picks the collection that's really right for their needs.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. And talking about commerce, and as you said, not everybody can develop everything. What would be marketing products that you would recommend, let's say, a mid-sized retailer, that they should integrate directly with the commerce platform to have a best of breed offering? Is there anything that you actually could recommend out of so many?
So rather than name specific tools, I think there's categories you obviously look at, right? I mean, it's all the other channels of communication that you have with the customer. And I think right now today, we used to think like, okay, well, if they're coming to the, e-commerce site, that's clearly one channel. And then we have email, and that's another channel. But now, you're starting to get this interesting mix of, if they've implemented some sort of, chatbot or live chat, what the mechanism is around that. Is it possible that they might be creating a voice skill, for voice discovery on, whether it's Amazon or Google or, Apple's platforms or things like that. And so, I guess, right, like search has always been another channel that you tend to get these specialized tools for search engine optimization. And so I think, for any company that's looking at, okay, we've got our core commerce technology, you just go through the list of what are the other touch points we have with customers, what's the best tools for us to optimize them, and then you start to think at the layer above that of how do I orchestrate those touch points so that there's some coherence and consistency in the way I'm communicating with them.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, Scott. So much of marketing today is very oriented around cookies, or at least historically it has been around cookies. And that's because the vast majority of traffic until a few years ago was just web. And with the web, you have these nice cookies you can use. But now that we're shifting more towards mobile apps, progressive web apps, a lot of smart devices, how do you mechanically track a user across all of the different touch points when there is no cookie on an IoT device, for example?
Yeah, I think there's two different issues here. There's a technical issue and there's a regulatory issue. Because I think, a lot of these regulatory policies that are being put in place are actually trying to minimize that or prevent that or put really strict, really tight restrictions, on companies' ability to do that. And we could argue the pros and cons of that, but if we set that aside and we say, listen, if really what it comes down to is the thing that these laws will allow is for a customer to raise their hand and say, I want to opt in to participate in communication with you on this channel, on this device, and the benefits that you are offering me are very transparent, and the data that I'm giving you in return is very transparent. I think that, I don't want to oversimplify it. I think there's a lot of work between here and there, technically in communications and, the whole shifting of expectations for everyone. But setting that aside, I think it gets us to a world where basically customers will opt in. They will identify the devices that they want to participate with a particular commercial relationship, and in exchange for that, they will get a set of benefits and they will have control, over that exchange. And yeah, you could argue that in the end that actually gets us to a better place, because when customers the more they are consciously engaging with us and agreeing to give us information and data, frankly, the higher the quality the data is. It's we could spend a whole podcast just on the data quality challenges in the marketing industry for years. I think this consent direction we're headed in, one of the big benefits to marketing will be the quality of the data is going to be just so much higher.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a very good point. Well, with that, I think we have to wrap up this episode. Thank you again, Scott, for taking the time to walk us as commerce folks through the marketing tech landscape. For people who want more information, Scott, do you want to provide your website and how listeners can follow you?
Sure. So my blog is chiefmartech, without the H at the end, .com. And that's also at chiefmartech is my handle on Twitter. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
All right. Thanks again, folks.
Thanks.
Bye.